In this best of episode, we are getting into the spirit. I'm Cat Neville, and this is Feast TV. So in this best of season of Feast TV, I'm going back into the archives, which began, believe it or not, in 2013, to pull out stories that I want to revisit or that were extremely popular. And in this episode, we're going to be taking a look back at some of the distilleries that we visited over the years. Now, the spirits industry is expanding by leaps and bounds. So with two of the folks who are visiting today, you're going to have a chance to really look at what they were doing when they first started out. And during the episode, I'm going to be making a blueberry, thyme, and black pepper shrub that I'm going to then mix into a cocktail featuring aged gin. So let's start everything off with a blast from the past with Still 630, which is located just south of downtown St. Louis.
Everybody comes in and they're a little unsure about the name. We put a lot of thought into this, and we capitalized the last L to emphasize STL. The 630, it stands for the date we were founded, June 30th. It also stands for the serial number of our still, which was handmade right here in Missouri. It's a unique, one-of-a-kind pot still. Most importantly, it stands for our inspiration, the height and width of the gateway arch, 630 feet high and wide. I had a very logical progression through life. From my college at Wabash College, where I was an English major, and then became a river rafting guide down in North Carolina. From that, I went to Chicago and became a futures trader. And I loved it, but it wasn't a life I could ever envision. Most of all, I wanted something where I was in control. I wanted to be responsible for my success or failure. So I wanted to start something that ideally future generations of my family can run. So a typical day for me really varies because I'm employee one of one, so I do everything around here. It's actually much more similar to brewing beer than people think. So this is where the whiskey making process starts. This is our mash tun. It's 500 gallons, double jacketed, and I heat it to 150 degrees, and I hold it there for about 90 minutes. And so once we've cooled it to 70 degrees, I transfer it over into these fermenters. When I went about choosing which whiskeys I wanted to start with, I like the bold, flavorful ones. And I don't mean that burn your tongue, I mean that have complex flavors and notes in your mouthfeel. I wanted something that was naturally delicious, and rye fit that bill for me. So much more front forward and flavorful and complex than corn or wheat, which are mellower and a little sweeter. And so I knew I wanted to start with an unaged spirit, so I'd have something to come to market with directly. And when I made our Big Jake, our White Dog whiskey, White Dog is a common term for white whiskey, unaged, and I have a big white dog named Jake, and that's where the name came from. Once I have it in these tanks, it's 70 degrees, ideal temperature for yeast, and we pitch our yeast in. 4 or 5 days later, they've created beer. Not the same beer you see all around town that's delicious, it's distiller's beer. It's a little bit more sour, it's acidic. It's about 7 or 8% alcohol though, and that's what we're really shooting for. We put this 8% alcohol in here, about 100 gallons of it. A still is basically a boiling device. So what I do is I raise the heat slowly to allow those different alcohols to boil off at their respective temperatures. I want to focus on rums. I've got a sorghum whiskey that's in little barrels out in the front that should be ready in the next few months that I'm very excited about. Bourbon is a pet of mine that I love it, and so I really want to make a good bourbon. And a lot of people think you can only make it in Kentucky. That's It's not true. It has to be in the United States. But I have to separate them like this, and I collect them in the mason jars as opposed to one big container, because I need to go through and separate out the good from the bad. The heads are the first ones to boil off, but these are the noxious chemicals. It's like acetaldehyde, acetone, it's nail polish remover stuff. I had a girl on a tour earlier this year who didn't believe me, and so stupidly I let her stick her finger in there. And she pulled it back out, and there was a nice clean line right there that had taken her nail polish off. And she started freaking out like, oh my God, I just did my nails this morning. And I said, oh my God, I told you what was gonna happen. Our rye whiskeys are a little bit smoother than people expect, especially for their young age. It's a complex flavor that has a lot of like sweet caramel notes. It's got that rye kind of spice to it, but it's not overwhelming. One of the most commonly remarked things that people say is, oh wow, that's kind of smooth. And that especially comes from a lot of non-self-identified whiskey drinkers. Like people, women, girlfriends that come in to do the tastings, wives, are surprised, like, oh, I could drink that. And when I hear that, I know that I've made a really good product, because people that don't normally drink it would be willing to. Yeah, it's phenomenal. I get to make something that people really enjoy. And it's a concrete product in my hand that I can stand behind and say, I made this.
So Dave has really taken that distillery to just amazing places. He has won scores of international as well as national awards, and he is now the current president of the Missouri Distillers Guild, and they have just recently launched a map where you can follow their trail across the state of Missouri and taste your way through all of our wonderful distilleries. So definitely take a look at what the Missouri Distillers Guild is up to. So kudos to Dave for his work on that. I'm going to get started on the Shrub. And yes, it's a plant, but it is also something that is used in cocktails. And technically, it's called a drinking vinegar. And this is a concoction where you can use any type of fruit that you would like. And it's a great way to use up fruit that is bruised or kind of past its sell-by date, as well as herbs and spices. And it's a really great way to kind of play around in the kitchen with things that are in season and then mix it into your cocktail. But of course, you don't have to mix it into a cocktail. If you want to mix it with some club soda or some juice, it's also a wonderful way to make a non-alcoholic beverage. So I'm going to get started, and right now the first step is to mix together equal parts sugar and vinegar. And really you can kind of decide what type of each you would like to work with. And so I've chosen brown sugar and a white balsamic vinegar because I'm looking for something that's going to have a little more depth and complexity. And so I'm just going to get started with that now. You'll see as this comes along just how quick and easy it is to make a shrub. So there's my brown sugar, 1 cup, and 1 cup of white balsamic vinegar. You can use any kind of vinegar that you want, but it needs to have 5% or more acidity. So just check the label when you're buying your vinegar and picking out what you want to use for your shrub. I have it on medium-high heat, and I'm just going to stir until the sugar dissolves and everything comes to a gentle simmer. While I'm stirring, let's head to Kansas City and meet the guys behind Lifted Spirits. They are making vodka and fantastic gin, and they actually run a bar right there inside of their distillery. Check it out.
This all sort of started off as a hobby. Michael and I have been friends for a long time. About 3.5 years ago, after a couple drinks, Michael came to me and said, I really want to open a distillery. I told him it was absolutely nuts and there was no way that was going to happen. And as a good friend, I was going to set out and do the research to show him why this was a terrible idea. I had to come back to him a couple days later and say, you know what, maybe it's not such a bad idea after all. The timing is right, there are so many different trends converging on this right now, and it's something that we're really passionate about and wanted to be able to do together with our two families. There's so much excitement and energy about craft spirits right now, it's really following almost the exact same trajectory as the beer industry about 25 years ago. We picked the East Crossroads in Kansas City for a number of reasons. It's such an exciting and growing and upcoming part of the city. There's so much art and energy and excitement down here right now. It absolutely aligned with our passions, with our interests, and there's no other part of Kansas City that had the energy that the Crossroads has right now.
This is quite a setup. So this is a column still, combined with a pot still?
Yes, so it's a hybrid fractioning still. We can run it like a pot still, we can run it like a fractioning still. And because the columns are mounted to the side, it's bypassable. And so we can put the vapor through just this column and not use the condenser and have a lot of copper contact and make whiskeys or brandies. Or if we're trying to make a neutral spirit, which is the base for our vodka, our gin, and our absinthe, we would change those valves at the very top, and then that forces the vapor down and up through each column, down and up, and so we end up with a lot of separation. And then if we're making a gin, we utilize the gin basket here.
So what do you enjoy about distilling itself, like the process of it?
I love all of the variables, how changing one little thing in the process can completely change a product. And it's just a lot of fun to be able to, at one stage, interpret what's coming off in the moment, and at another stage, be able to dig into research and make it all sync.
What did you do before this?
My degree's in theology.
Oh, interesting.
So I was a pastor.
Okay.
One of the things I really loved about my theology degree is that I learned how to learn. And so I learned how to research and how to find things out and utilize them. So I started with some New Zealand home distillation texts. Obviously I was just reading it for theory. And some 19th century French distillation manuals and some organic chem books, and started practicing.
That's great. And now, I mean, you really are creating a product that is bringing people together. You can look out through these doors right here and see the people who are enjoying the spirits that you've made. I mean, was that a very intentional design choice?
I wasn't thinking just them coming back or me being able to look forward. I was just thinking exchange. We want people to know that this stuff is accessible.
When we decided to open a distillery, one of the things we were really excited about was kind of pulling back that veil and letting people come in and experience the spirits from the grain coming in the back door, and see and smell and taste, and really get an understanding of how our spirits are made. And then we wanted to create an environment in the tasting room where people could taste those spirits in cocktails that range from the simple, classic, traditional to some really new, interesting, exciting signature drinks that we've created.
So I'm going to be making the Wild East. It's a vodka cocktail, definitely one of our most popular drinks here. Kansas City is such a barbecue place that I just figured a cocktail with smoke in it would absolutely make sense and fit in. So the very first thing in the cocktail is a jalapeno shrub, basically jalapeno syrup. It also has lime juice in it, a little bit of simple syrup as well to give it a little bit of sweetness. And then we put a full 2 ounces of vodka in it. Then you just strain it in. You can kind of like see a lot of like that smoke like reacting with like the cold there, so it ends up looking really fun. So that's the Wild East.
When you were putting together your gin recipe, there are so many different styles of gin. Like what did you want the Lifted Spirits gin to be?
We wanted our gin to be someone that you could walk up to, be fast friends, and someone that you feel like you could just tell your whole story to right away. We wanted that kind of personal experience with the spirit.
I've never heard anyone describe the creative process in trying to create a persona for the product. So
Me either. I'd never done that before, and I thought it was a fantastic idea. It helped a lot.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. So how did you take that and turn that into a recipe? So how many botanicals are in the
10, which is a little higher than I wanted, but than I initially was going for. But they balance really well. They play well with each other. Our gin has more juniper in it than all the other botanicals combined. So main ingredients being juniper and coriander, which traditionally are the main ingredients in gin. And then the other examples that we have here, we have cardamom pods. We use the whole pod, not just the seed.
And rose too, huh?
Hibiscus.
Oh, okay.
Hibiscus. And then we also include some things like chamomile and some florals, and then there's some other botanicals like orris root being iris root, which they serve more of a purpose than just flavor. They actually stabilize the spirit. Those are some of the botanicals we use.
I think the growth of the spirits category can really be attributed to cocktail movement, and there's just so much that you can do with it. There's so much variety, so much interpretation. There's a lot of creativity there. So just like the guys at Lifted Spirits, there are lots of distillers who are making gin across the region, and it's because they can really put their stamp on it. And while the main flavor component in gin is juniper, they can just play around with so many other ingredients. And so you're finding just really interesting stuff going on across the entire state, across the Midwest, really. So my next step in my shrub is I'm going to add in blueberries and thyme and black peppercorns. And I chose this flavor combination because I like blueberries and thyme together, and I thought that adding in that black peppercorn would add some really interesting aroma and some spice notes to the shrub. But again, you can make this your own. You can do strawberries, you can do ginger, you can use really pears and apples, you can do anything that you want. So I'm just gonna let this simmer, and all of these berries are gonna pop and open up and release their juice. And once that happens, and everything is kind of cooked and melded together, then we're done. All we have to do is strain it and cool it. Our next stop on our spirited tour of the region is at Wood Hat Spirits, which is in New Florence, Missouri, really close to the middle of the state. And I've known Gary for a number of years. He's doing some really innovative stuff out at his distillery. Not only is he working with heritage breeds of corn, he is also the only wood-fired distillery in the state. So let's head and meet Gary now.
I was a microbrewer. I like to drink, but I don't like headaches and I don't like hangovers. And when I learned how to separate those apart, I decided that's what I wanted to do, distilling. You know, it's just right for the times. It was right for me and my life, and I just went for it. I was a biology major. I did microbiology. You know, I got a degree in biology, and then I got a degree in agronomy. So the corn, wheat, and soybeans thing. And then I worked for a barrel company for several years. Just everything in my life has led up to this point. When I was a kid, we used to cut white oak timber and make barrel staves. You know, so everything in my life is kind of built up to this point. We make most whiskey in this country out of yellow corn. And we raise yellow corn for cows and pigs. People do not eat yellow corn. That's not roasting ears, that's not sweet corn, that's field corn. So I decided if you're gonna make whiskey to drink, why don't we make it out of corn that we eat? So I've selected blue corn because the Hopi Indians and all down through Central and South America, they've eaten it for centuries. And it's selected for taste, not yield. So we start with wood that's local. We've got a big pot still, and we have wood fired. And then the wood, between the wood and the still is a big tank of oil. So we heat the oil and we pump the oil into the pot to cook with. So the coils are actually inside the pot. And it takes a long time. It's a slow process. We don't have really rapid heating up or cooling down. It's real slow and gentle, and that gives us more time to separate the heads and tails. Yeah, the barrel is subjected to pressure. It's sealed, more or less. It's got a stopper in it. So when the pressure outside here changes, we have a change in barometric pressure. It doesn't change in here. So we have a drop in barometric pressure outside. There's pressure in the barrel, and it forces the whiskey into the wood, so to speak. Then we have the pressure changes, and it pushes it back out of the. So that's what goes in and out of the wood, creates the aging process. We make a blue corn whiskey straight out of still, a white whiskey. It's an 80 proof, 100% blue corn. And then we take that blue corn and we age it into a barrel, a small barrel like you see here. And we use a toasted barrel for the corn whiskey. And then we make two different bourbons. We make a traditional bourbon, which is out of yellow corn and wheat, in a brand new white oak barrel. And then we make a blue corn wheat bourbon, and we age it in a chinkapin charred barrel. So as a small distiller, we're able to do some different things that the big guys can't because of our size. We go and start with the white whiskeys and take it to the more complicated bourbons. And the most single comment that we hear is, "This is really smooth." It's exciting. I mean, it has to be exciting. You know, when they say, "Oh, this is really smooth," or "This is great," you know, it's just like, wow.
So I mentioned that Dave is the current president of the Missouri Distillers Guild, and Gary was actually the very first president of the organization and helped get it off the ground. It's wonderful to see just the growth in the spirits industry. I mean, it's amazing just how many new distilleries are being added to the ranks every single year. Okay, my shrub is complete. I have taken it off of the heat, obviously. Now the next step is just to strain it so that you get all of those solids out. So I just have a couple layers of cheesecloth and a strainer. Super easy. So just use your spatula to press on those solids and get all of the flavor out of those ingredients. I'm gonna move this to the side, out of the way. And then I'm gonna go ahead and strain this into a jar so that it's easier for me to keep, because this will keep in the refrigerator for a good couple of weeks. If Kool-Aid was delicious and highly concentrated, that is essentially what this tastes like. It is sweet and it is tangy, it's fruity, it's really, really lovely. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and make my cocktail now. I have a shaker, there's already ice. I'm going to use 1.5 ounces of aged gin, and this happens to be from Pinckney Bend. And if you want to get an inside look at their distillery, there's more content, tons more content on feastmagazine.com, and you'll be able to take a tour of their distillery as well. Just a 1/2 ounce of our Shrub, which has tons of flavor. Shake. I'm going to double strain this just because I don't want the ice chips, and I have a nice big ice cube in my free booze glass. Look at that color. That is obviously from the Shrub. Oh, that looks awesome. So we're gonna float just a little bit of sparkling wine on top. It adds a little bit of fizz and just a little additional flavor. And this cocktail not only highlights the wonderful flavors in the blueberry and thyme shrub, but also the warm, rounded flavor of aged gin, which is super trendy right now. So if you want to see the recipe for the Shrub and this cocktail, just head to feastmagazine.com. Cheers, and I will see you next time.